ever get that feeling? Like you've been working towards something, maybe it's a big goal you finally achieved, or even a prayer that's been answered. And, you should be happy.
Right.
Yeah,
You should be on top of the world.
exactly.
Yeah.
But instead, there's this, I don't know, emptiness. Like, is this it? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there at some point. It's almost like you reach that mountaintop, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you just kind of look around and go, huh, what now?
Right. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're taking a look at a podcast episode from Rhythms of Grace Center, and it's called What Do You Do When God Has Answered All Your Needs?
Catchy title.
It is, right. And they get into this whole idea of success versus fulfillment and how to keep that hunger for spiritual growth, even when, like, things are going well, on the outside.
It's a good point because I think we often equate success with fulfillment. Like if we just achieve this or get that, then we'll be happy. But as you said, that's not always how it works.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of the things this episode does that I thought was so helpful was use this analogy of two breads, like earthly bread and heavenly bread.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah, so earthly bread, that represents the material success, the answered prayers, the tangible things we often strive for.
Makes sense. The things we can see and touch and, check off our list.
Exactly. But then there's heavenly bread, and that symbolizes a deeper connection with God, aligning ourselves with His will, which ultimately leads to true fulfillment.
So, like, you can be feasting on earthly bread, having all your material needs met. But if you're neglecting the heavenly bread, you're still going to be spiritually hungry.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And the episode even ties us back to the Lord's Prayer, how Jesus teaches us to ask for our daily bread.
Right.
But then right after that, it's, your will be done. So it's like we need both kinds of nourishment to truly thrive.
It is interesting when you think about it like that. We often focus so much on that first part, the daily bread, the getting our needs met. But the second part, seeking God's will, that's just as crucial.
Absolutely. And it reminded me of that verse, when Jesus is in the desert and Satan tempts him. And Jesus says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Like it's a reminder that there's more to life than just satisfying our physical needs.
Food for thought, literally.
Exactly. So, okay, if we're not just chasing earthly bread, how do we actually find that heavenly bread? How do we find that deeper sense of fulfillment? And the episode uses the story of Abraham as an example, which I thought was fascinating, but also, a little bit challenging.
Yeah, the story of Abraham can be tough, but it definitely makes you think. For those who maybe aren't familiar with it, Abraham is like this, major figure in the faith. He's achieved great wealth. He has a family, status, you name it, but God puts him to the test.
Right, by asking him to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Which, that's always felt like, a pretty intense request.
It's definitely a heavy story, and it sparked a lot of debate and interpretation over the centuries. But I think the key takeaway here, and what the episode highlights, is that it's not really about the literal act of sacrifice.
Oh, I see.
It's more about what it represents, which is, that willingness to surrender even what we hold most precious to us, to put God's will above, well, frankly, our own desires, to choose God's plan over what we think is best.
And that ties into that key quote from the episode, losing our advantage for God's advantage. Which, honestly can feel like a big ask. Like letting go of something we see as beneficial, even if it is ultimately for a greater purpose.
It definitely goes against our human nature, doesn't it? I mean, we're wired to hold on to things, to protect ourselves, to seek comfort and security. We build up these advantages in life, whether it's a successful career, a loving family, or even just, material possessions.
Yeah, and it can feel scary to surrender those things. Like, what if it all falls apart?
Right. But what if, and here's the challenge, what if by holding on so tightly to our advantages, we're actually missing out on something even greater? What if, by letting go, by placing those things in God's hands, we open ourselves up to a different kind of fulfillment, a deeper sense of purpose?
That's powerful. So it's not about denying our success or, even our needs, but maybe just recognizing that there's this whole other level of fulfillment that comes from aligning ourselves with something bigger than ourselves, with God's plan.
Exactly. And that's what I think keeps us genuinely hungry for spiritual growth. Even when we have, all our earthly needs met, there's still this desire to connect with God's will, to contribute to His purpose.
This has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's like, even when we're checking things off our list, achieving our goals, we have to ask ourselves, am I holding on to something that might be preventing me from experiencing true fulfillment? What advantage? And maybe it's something good. I need to surrender. It's a tough question, but man, is it important.
It is, and I think that's a great note to end on. It's something for all of us to consider as we go about our lives, striving for success, but also seeking that deeper fulfillment.
Well said.